The shocking truth about Judas, betrayer or God's plan. You've heard the story 1,000 times, Judas Iscariot, the disciple who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. The ultimate villain, the traitor. But what if everything you've been told about Judas is wrong? What if his betrayal was not just a moment of weakness, but part of a divine plan so shocking, it changes everything? 1. The Judas we think we know. Most people picture Judas as the greedy, backstabbing friend who sold out Jesus for pocket change. Paintings show him with dark, shifty eyes, clutching that infamous bag of silver. But here's the problem. History is written by the winners. What if the real Judas was nothing like the monster we've been taught to hate? Consider this. When we reduce Judas to just the betrayer, we miss the complexity of his relationship with Jesus. He was not some random outsider. He was one of the 12, trusted enough to handle the group's money. For 3 years, he walked with Jesus, witnessed miracles, and heard teachings no one else had access to. So what changed? Some scholars suggest Judas may have been disillusioned, expecting Jesus to overthrow Roman rule, not die on a cross. His betrayal might have been less about greed and more about forcing Jesus' hand, a tragic miscalculation of divine purpose. And think about how quickly we label people as evil when their stories are more nuanced. Judas was not born a villain. He was a man who made a choice with catastrophic consequences. But does not that make him more relatable? Haven't we all had moments where our actions spiraled beyond what we intended? 2. The betrayal that had to happen. Think about it. Without Judas, there's no arrest, no crucifixion, no resurrection. Jesus himself said, "The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him." Was Judas playing a role he did not fully understand? Some ancient texts suggest he might have been the most loyal disciple of all, the one willing to bear the curse of betrayal so salvation could happen. The Bible is full of moments where God uses flawed people to fulfill his plans. Moses the murderer, David the adulterer, Peter the denier. Why would Judas be any different? In John 13 verse 27, Jesus tells Judas, "What you're about to do, do quickly." That does not sound like surprise, it sounds like acknowledgement. Some theologians argue Judas was the only disciple brave enough to do what had to be done, even if it meant being hated for eternity. And let's not forget, Jesus knew Judas would betray him from the beginning. If he knew, why did not he stop it? Unless the betrayal itself was necessary. This is not about excusing Judas' actions, it's about recognizing that even the darkest moments can serve a higher purpose. 3. The first glimmer of hope. This is where things get unexpected. The Gospel of Judas, discovered in the 1970s, paints a radically different picture. In it, Jesus tells Judas, "You will exceed all of them, for you will sacrifice the man that clothes me." Was Judas actually following a secret instruction? If so, his story is not one of shame. It's one of unimaginable sacrifice. The Gospel of Judas, though controversial, raises a haunting question. What if Judas was the only one who truly understood Jesus' mission? In the text, Jesus tells Judas, "You will be cursed by the other generations, and you will come to rule over them." That's not condemnation, it's a promise of vindication. Early Christian groups like the Cainites revered Judas as a hero, believing he sacrificed his reputation to free Christ's spirit from its earthly prison. This perspective flips the script entirely. Instead of a cautionary tale about greed, Judas becomes a tragic figure, someone who carried out God's will at the cost of his own name. It forces us to ask, would we be willing to play the villain if it meant fulfilling divine purpose? 4. The weight of 30 pieces of silver. That payment was not random. In Zechariah 11 verses 12 to 13, it's the price of a slave, and the exact amount thrown into the temple before the Messiah's suffering. Coincidence? Or proof this was all foretold? Judas did not just fulfill prophecy, he became the hinge on which history turned. The 30 pieces of silver weren't just payment, they were symbolic. In Exodus 21 verse 32, that's the price for a slave gored by an ox. Judas essentially valued Jesus at the cost of a dead slave. Yet even this was prophesied. Zechariah 11 describes a shepherd paid 30 pieces of silver and told to throw it to the potter, which Judas did after his guilt overwhelmed him. Every detail was foreshadowed centuries earlier. This level of precision raises a chilling thought. If Judas' actions were predicted so specifically, how much free will did he really have? It's a paradox that theologians have wrestled with for centuries, one that makes Judas' story far more complex than simple betrayal. 5. The darkest moment, and why it matters. When Judas realized what he'd done, the guilt destroyed him. He returned the money, then took his own life. But what if his despair was not just remorse? What if he thought he'd ruined everything, not knowing his actions were necessary? That's the tragedy. He died believing he was a monster, never seeing the resurrection. Judas' suicide is one of the Bible's most heartbreaking moments. Matthew 27 verse 5 says he went away and hanged himself, but Acts 1 verse 18 describes him falling and bursting open. Some scholars suggest both could be true, a failed hanging leading to a gruesome death. Either way, his end was agonizing, physically and spiritually. This was not just guilt, it was total despair. Judas did not live to see the resurrection, the very event his betrayal made possible. Imagine realizing too late that your worst act was part of something greater, but being unable to witness the redemption. It's a warning about the danger of isolating ourselves in shame. 6. The turning point. A different perspective. Here's what changes everything. Jesus prayed for his executioners. Father, forgive them. They do not know what they're doing. Did that include Judas? If Jesus could forgive the soldiers nailing him to the cross, could he also forgive the friend who handed him over? The answer might rewrite how you see mercy. Jesus' forgiveness on the cross was not conditional. He did not say, "I'll forgive you if you apologize first." He forgave the soldiers who mocked him, the religious leaders who condemned him. Why not Judas? In Luke 22 verse 48, Jesus even calls Judas friend in the moment of betrayal. That single word changes everything. If Jesus could extend grace to his executioners, is there any sin beyond redemption? Judas' story forces us to confront the limits we place on forgiveness, both for others and ourselves. Maybe the real scandal is not Judas' betrayal, but how wide God's mercy truly is. 7. What the church doesn't talk about. For centuries, Judas was the ultimate scapegoat, but early Christians debated his role. Some believed he was destined for redemption. Clement of Alexandria wrote that Judas repented in a manner befitting God's knowledge. What if hell was not his final stop? The early church was deeply divided on Judas. Origen argued his suicide proved genuine repentance, while Augustine saw him as irredeemable. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church even has a tradition that Judas' suicide was interrupted by a branch, giving him time to seek forgiveness before dying. These debates reveal an uncomfortable truth. We've simplified Judas because wrestling with his complexity threatens our black and white view of morality. What if the church's demonization of Judas says more about our fear of moral ambiguity than about God's judgment? After all, Jesus did not curse Judas. He washed his feet alongside the others at the Last Supper. 8. The surprising lesson for us. Judas' story forces a hard question. Have you ever felt like your mistakes disqualified you from grace? What if even betrayal cannot outrun divine purpose? Judas shows us that no one is beyond being part of God's plan, even when they do not see it. Judas' legacy challenges us to examine our own failures. Have you ever done something you thought disqualified you from grace? Maybe you betrayed a trust, acted out of selfishness, or hurt someone irreparably. Judas' story whispers, what if even this is part of your redemption arc? The difference between Peter and Judas was not the severity of their sins. Both betrayed Jesus. The difference was that Peter lived long enough to receive forgiveness. Judas' tragedy is that he did not believe mercy could reach him. 9. The biggest misconception. We assume Judas had free will to say no. But if his betrayal was prophesied centuries earlier, did he ever really have a choice? This is not about blaming God. It's about realizing some roles in history are so vital, they require someone willing to play them, no matter the cost. The idea of predestination versus free will is not just theological debate, it's personal. If Judas' role was foreordained, does that make him a puppet? Or does it mean God can work through even our worst choices? Paul writes in Romans 8 verse 28 that all things work together for good, not that all things are good. Judas' betrayal was evil, but God used it to accomplish the greatest good. This does not absolve Judas of responsibility, but it reframes his story. Maybe the question is not, why did Judas do it? But why did God allow it? And the answer might just redefine how you see your own struggles. 10. The hope you didn't see coming. Judas' story ends in darkness, but the Bible's does not. Revelation 21 verse 5 says God makes all things new. If creation itself gets a second chance, who's to say Judas does not? Maybe the real shock is not his betrayal, but how far grace can reach. So here's my question for you. Does Judas deserve our pity instead of our hatred? Let me know in the comments, and if this video made you rethink one of history's most infamous men, hit like and share it with someone who needs to see grace in a new light.